All right, it's Kyle Figley on CBR. We're here at Comic-Con with the man in the big chair, Marvel Comics editor-in-chief, Mr. Cebulski.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
So, you were just saying this a minute ago. You were in Japan. You were on the bullet train. You were on the plane. And then did you have meetings in LA too? And then you came to Comic-Con?
And then came to Comic-Con, yes.
What kind of stuff are you still traveling for? Because I know that you were doing so much traveling before you became editor-in-chief.
Yep.
Are you still keeping a finger on some of those international pies and things like that?
After I became editor-in-chief, well, before I became editor-in-chief, I was, running the head of Marvel Asia. And after I became editor-in-chief, there were still connections that I had and deals that were in place that I had to see through and pass on to the next kind of wave of people who were taking over. So this was the last kind of trip over to make sure everything was settled, to do, finish up a Chinese talent search that we were on, to finalize a couple of these manga deals that we're going to be doing, and then kind of turn everything over to the team there so I can kind of, start staying in the States a little bit more.
All right. Are you excited? I mean, you're a traveling guy, but are you excited to be homebound for a while?
Yeah, I've been traveling a lot less since I came back, and took on the job editor-in-chief, and that's been great. Working with the team, being in the office day to day, just in the grind, making comics is what I was born to do and what I love doing, and I couldn't be happier doing it. And now being able to be home even more without having to concentrate on some of the previous stuff is going to make the Marvel line even stronger and better and more exciting.
Well, let's talk about the Marvel line as a whole, right? Yep. I mean, I think a lot of people kind of unfairly compare when they're talking about your job to when Joe Q came in, 20 years ago now or whatever.
Yeah.
But when he came in, it was a very stark break and the line changed completely. And I don't think that is something that can really happen when publishing is going along. But like, as you've been in there and as you've been looking at the line as a whole, I mean, do you have a specific way that you describe your editorial vision? Is there a thing that says, this is what I want to see us doing that we haven't done before?
No, it's been difficult, not difficult to say, so to speak, but to come in and put my arms around the line and the team and everyone that's there in this kind of day and age.
Yeah.
Hasn't been easy, to be honest with you, and when the first day I got on the job, there was a letter from Joe, like, when one president passes a note to the next president. Joe left me a very nice note about what he learned as editor-in-chief and advice that I should take. And it's really kind of, make your mark on your own. Don't look at the generations who have gone before, keep what they did in mind, but you really have to start taking Marvel Comics in line with your own vision. And the way that I always saw it was, Joe always called himself, or was referred to as, kind of the artist editor-in-chief, being an artist himself. Yeah. Axel was a very great story editor, and he was kind of the writer's editor-in-chief. So for me, just offhandedly, people have been saying, you're the fan's editor-in-chief, because I grew up a fan. I never stopped reading comics. I never had that lapse. From when I was 6 years old till now, I've never stopped being that Wednesday word, no matter where I was in the world or living at the time. So the two things that I really focused on is, tell stories from the heart, tell stories that I would want to read as a reader, as a fan, and also, in order to move forward to the future, we cannot forget the past. So we have to look at what other writers and other creators did, what worked and what didn't, and find a path that respects the previous comics, that builds upon the stories that are there, and to move us into the future, for the line.
You bring up so much that I wanted to ask about already, so this is good. But let's start with some of the books and events that are going to be coming up in the months ahead, because I feel like because when you came in was right when, now I'm going to forget the Legacy.
Yes.
Right when Legacy was going on, but I feel like now we're starting to see waves of different stuff that are coming. First off, there's obviously House of X and Powers of 10, which, Hickman has talked about some of his conceptual approach. Stories are something we try to stay spoiler-free on. I know you guys do. But I'm talking about conceptually in terms of the publishing vision. I mean, saying, hey, we're going to take the X-Men, which has traditionally been the ground zero for there's 20 books in a line of characters, and we're going to say, hey, there's going to be 2 books for 6 months. How do you look at that as editor-in-chief? I mean, do you say, all right, Jonathan, I can give you the leeway to completely bulldoze it for 6 months, and then we've got to get back to thinking about the X-Men as a line and building up books? I mean, how do you view that?
It really wasn't that way at all. X-Men for me is the book that I started with, and it's where my heart is. I'm an X-Men guy through and through.
Yeah.
No offense to the Avengers or the Fantastic Four fans. I love everybody, but X-Men was the book that spoke to me the most when I was a younger reader, characters that I have the most affinity for. And Jonathan's the same way. And when, I came back and he came in with this crazy idea, it wasn't just this, hey, here's these 12 issues I want to do and how I want to kind of reimagine the X-Men. It was, here is a plan I have that could go a minimum of 3 years for as long as we needed to go based on how things do. And that's the kind of forward thinking that Jonathan's always had and that he's had success with. And I knew there's the kind of thinking that we needed to apply to the X-Men. And the thing about this kind of the Powers of 10 and House of X, there's been a lot of terms thrown out for it. Oh, it's a reboot, it's a relaunch, it's a rebranding. And it's really none of that. We don't really do that. Everything that happened in X-Men, up to Matt Rosenberg's Uncanny X-Men 22, which came out today, was a part of this plan. We've been building this for 2 years with the writers. Everybody knew where this was going and their tenures were going to end, and we're contributing to this story that Jonathan's telling, putting the pieces in place that we needed. So what happened in Matt's 22 is directly going to influence what Jonathan has planned. And that's something that people don't understand. And Jonathan said it recently in an interview that he is building on everything that came before, from what, Stan did to what Cockrum did to what Claremont and Byrne did to what Jim Lee and Joe Matt did. Everything is still there. Everything still happened. And this is just taking it to that next level. So it's like, what's the next level of evolution in the X-Men? I mean, we've been through all these different things. It's feared and hated and whatnot. And Jonathan's saying, what's that next step, which is the futurism. And then this is going to really blow people's minds with what he's doing with not just the X-Men as the characters, but with mutantdom and the X-gene and all that kind of science behind the X-Men as a whole.
So do you look in terms of like some of the concepts and that, because you talk about how everything is continuing, we've got to look to our past. Do you look and say, okay, we've just had a title that is Uncanny X-Men. Now Jonathan's coming in with two very new kinds of titles. But yes. Do you say, at some point in the future, I know we've got to have an Uncanny book or an X-Force book or an X-Factor book or a New Mutants or whatever like that?
Yeah, we can't forget those legacy titles because those are the bread and butter of what, makes part of Marvel the line, and also, that fans recognize and put their dollars forward for. And in the future, there could possibly be some of those titles. There could also be possibly some new titles. Like I said, Jonathan has a very far-reaching plan. There's a lot of new stuff that we're going to be introducing that we hope fans embrace. But we are never entitling, at some point in the future, going to forget those titles that fans know and love and the legacy numbering that goes along with them. And, they want those issues in their long boxes as it continues. And I want those issues too. So we're not going to forget about that.
No, and this is even more specific to X-Men fans, I feel.
Yes, it very much is.